Imagine the air that crystallizes breath, the silence that crunches under boots, and a long night that embraces entire villages, where sleeping at 5 degrees Celsius is routine and 25 degrees marks the heart of winter for centuries among peoples who learn to converse with the cold. How does one sleep and live in a world that bites the skin? This is not just a question, it's a whisper that echoes through generations, carried on the icy wind of the Siberian tundra. It's the questioning that keeps awake those who have never felt true cold, the cold that doesn't forgive, the cold that transforms each breath into a small cloud of vapor and each movement into a calculated survival decision. Imagine for a moment, you're lying in your comfortable bed, perhaps complaining because the temperature dropped to 15 degrees. Now, transport your mind to a place where 15 degrees would be a tropical luxury, a gift from the winter gods. We're talking about a universe where -5 degrees Celsius is considered a mild night, where -25 degrees marks the true embrace of Siberian winter. But here's the mystery that fascinates us. For millions of people, this isn't a death sentence. It's home. It's routine. It's the natural rhythm of life that has pulsed for millennia under the white mantle of Siberia. The question that hooks our curiosity is born from an apparently impossible contradiction. How has something that would kill us in hours become the cradle of entire civilizations? How have peoples like the Nganasan, the Yakut, the Even, transformed what we consider uninhabitable into home, tradition, identity? The answer isn't just in technology, though it's crucial. It's not just in genetics, though it plays its role. The true answer is a complex symphony that resonates through 4 fundamental dimensions of human existence: the body that adapts, the fire that warms, the skin that protects, and the table where fat transforms into life. Think about it. While you might struggle to fall asleep when your room temperature rises a few degrees above comfort, there are children in Siberia who fall asleep cradled by the sound of wind cutting through frozen forests, where the thermometer marks temperatures that would make your teeth chatter uncontrollably. These children aren't superheroes. They don't possess supernatural powers. They are the product of a long conversation between humanity and extreme cold, a negotiation that lasted centuries, passed from generation to generation through knowledge that was never written in books, but engraved in the cellular memory of peoples who learned to dance with winter instead of fighting against it. The human body, this extraordinary machine we carry, reveals its deepest secrets when confronted with extreme challenges. Among these Siberian peoples, we discover that adaptation isn't just a pretty word in biology books. It's a lived reality, breathed, felt in every cell. Their hearts beat differently. Their blood flows through optimized pathways. Their hands and feet maintain active circulation even when the world around them becomes a natural freezer. It's as if each person were a walking furnace, calibrated by nature to generate internal heat in ways that we, inhabitants of temperate climates, lost long ago. But the body is just the first verse of this survival song. Fire, literal and metaphorical, is the refrain that repeats night after night. We're not just talking about flames dancing in rustic fireplaces, though they're fundamental. We're talking about the internal fire that comes from the right food, the right clothes, the right rituals that keep life pulsing when the outside world seems determined to freeze it. Animal fat, which many of us avoid in our modern diets, becomes the sacred fuel of this existence. Fatty fish, reindeer meat, organs rich in nutrients. Each meal is a strategic decision to keep the internal engine running through nights that can last months. And then there's the second skin. Clothes that aren't just fashion but survival architecture. Animal skins worked with ancestral techniques, sewn with surgical precision, designed to create microclimates of warmth around the human body. Each coat, each boot, each glove is a small miracle of vernacular engineering. But perhaps the most fascinating thing is how these adaptations interweave with something even deeper: the human capacity to find peace, comfort, and even beauty in what seems impossible. Because sleeping in extreme cold isn't just a technical matter of survival. It's an art, a philosophy, a completely different way of understanding what it means to be alive. So when we ask, how does one sleep and live in a world that bites the skin, we're really asking something much deeper. What are we capable of becoming when necessity forces us to transcend our apparent limits? How does humanity find not just survival, but dignity, culture, and even happiness in the most hostile corners of our planet? The answer is kept in the simplest gestures. in the way a mother adjusts the furs around her baby, in the ritual of preparing the first hot meal of the day, in the way a family gathers around the fire to share stories that keep alive not just bodies, but also spirits during the long Siberian winters. This is the question that hooks us, pulls us into this journey, to discover not just how they survive, but how they transformed survival into art, cold into home, and the impossible into everyday life. There's a silent revolution happening inside the chest of every Nganasan, every Yakut, every Even who walks across the Siberian tundra. It's a revolution that makes no noise, waves no flags, but burns constantly, literally, in the cells of people who carry living furnaces where we carry only common muscles and organs. Imagine your body as a house in winter. Most of us have basic heating. When cold comes, we shiver. It's our primitive response, our last resort. We shiver to generate heat through involuntary muscle movement, burning precious energy desperately and inefficiently. It's like trying to heat an entire mansion with matches. But Siberian peoples evolved beyond this rudimentary solution. They developed something scientists call adaptive thermogenesis, an extraordinary capacity to produce heat without the dramatic waste of shivering. It's as if every cell in the body learned to be a small individual furnace, burning fuel constantly and controllably. Let's dive deeper into this fascinating mechanics. At the heart of this adaptation is a special tissue called brown fat. While common white fat simply stores energy, brown fat is a biological thermoelectric plant. It's filled with mitochondria, the small energy factories of cells that work differently when exposed to chronic cold. Among Siberian peoples, this brown fat doesn't disappear in adulthood, as it does with most humans. It remains active, strategically located around the neck, shoulders, along the spine. It's like having an internal thermal vest that never turns off, generating heat constantly and silently. But the real magic happens at the molecular level. Their bodies produce more of a protein called UCP1, the uncoupling thermogenin protein. This protein has a very specific job. It purposefully sabotages efficient energy production in mitochondria, forcing extra energy to be released as heat instead of being stored. It's programmed inefficiency that becomes the greatest possible efficiency for survival in extreme cold. The hearts of these peoples also tell a different story. Studies reveal they possess significantly higher basal metabolic rates, up to 15% above normal. This means that even in complete rest, sleeping deeply under reindeer skins, their bodies are burning more fuel, producing more internal heat than a temperate climate person's body would ever produce. Think of it as the difference between an economy car and a racing engine. The economy car saves fuel, but when you need real power, when life depends on performance, you want the engine that burns strong and steady. This constant burning requires specific fuel, and this is where adaptation becomes even more sophisticated. Siberian bodies process fats and proteins differently. Their digestive enzymes, their liver processes, even the way their muscles use energy. Everything was refined through millennia to extract maximum heat from every calorie consumed. There's also a fascinating dance happening in their blood vessels, where we suffer from vasoconstriction, the narrowing of vessels that cut circulation to hands and feet when we're cold. They developed a system called cold-induced vasodilation. Their veins and arteries and extremities open periodically, sending waves of warm blood to toes and fingers, keeping them functional even at temperatures that would cause us frostbite. It's like a highly sophisticated central heating system, where the thermostat isn't on the wall but encoded in DNA, adjusted through generations of natural selection to maintain perfect temperature where it's most needed. But perhaps the most impressive adaptation is neurological. Their brains process cold fundamentally differently. Where we feel discomfort, pain, urgency to escape, they feel useful information. Cold becomes a sixth sense. They can detect subtle temperature changes that indicate weather changes, wind direction, even the approach of animals. This refined sensitivity isn't just survival, it's art. It's the difference between someone who fights against cold and someone who converses with it, who reads it like an open book, who uses it as a tool. During sleep, that vulnerable state where our bodies normally decrease heat production, they maintain a basal burn that protects them through nights that can last months. Their sleep cycles also adapted. Periods of deep sleep alternated with micro-awakenings that allow adjusting clothes, position, proximity to heat sources. It's important to understand that these aren't adaptations that happen in one generation. They're deep epigenetic modifications, changes that accumulated over thousands of years, passed not just through genes, but also through cultural practices that influence genetic expression. A Siberian mother doesn't just carry genes adapted to cold. She lives in a way that activates these genes in her children. The diet rich in specific fats, gradual and controlled exposure to cold, patterns of activity and rest. All this works as a training program that awakens dormant adaptations in the genetic code. The result is a population where each person carries a small internal furnace, calibrated by evolution and refined by culture. Bodies that don't just survive extreme cold, but thrive in it, finding in this hostile environment not an enemy to be defeated, but a partner in the eternal dance of human life. When a Yakut falls asleep peacefully at -20 degrees, it's not because he's braver or more resistant than us. It's because his body literally makes fire, a controlled, efficient, beautiful fire that burns softly through the longest night, keeping life lit when the world around seems determined to freeze it forever. There's a sacred moment that repeats every day in the frozen vastness of Siberia. It's when the first spoonful of hot fat touches the lips of a Yakut child, when the steam from fatty fish soup rises slowly in the crystalline air, when the still warm blood of a freshly slaughtered reindeer is offered as the most precious gift the tundra can give. For us, inhabitants of climate-controlled supermarkets, food is pleasure, convenience, sometimes even guilt. For the peoples of Siberia, each meal is a strategic life or death decision, each ingredient a carefully chosen piece in the complex puzzle of thermal survival. Imagine your body as a steam locomotive crossing the planet's most hostile landscape. This locomotive needs fuel. Not just any fuel, but the exact type of energy that burns long, strong, and clean, keeping the internal furnace lit through nights that can last 4 consecutive months. Traditional Siberian diet isn't just nutrition, it's ancestral pharmacology, nutritional engineering refined through millennia of experimentation where error meant extinction. Each bite carries a lesson learned at the cost of generations. Each dish is a survival recipe tested by the most implacable time. At the center of this nutrition is something our modern culture has demonized: animal fat. But here, far from nutritional offices and fad diets, fat reveals its true nature: supreme fuel for bodies that need to maintain stable internal temperatures when the outside world becomes a natural freezer. Fatty fish, salmon, Arctic trout, omul, isn't just protein. It's biological diesel fuel, loaded with long-chain omega-3 fatty acids that do much more than protect the heart. These fatty acids integrate into cell membranes, keeping them flexible even when body temperature needs to work under extreme conditions. It's like natural antifreeze for human cellular machinery. But it's in reindeer meat that we find the true alchemy of Arctic survival. These animals are walking pharmacies, concentrating in their tissues exactly the nutrients human bodies need to thrive in extreme cold. The meat isn't just rich in high-quality proteins. It carries easily absorbed hemiiron, zinc, selenium, and a constellation of minerals that function as cofactors in the enzymatic reactions of heat production. Reindeer graze on lichens during the brief Arctic summer, concentrating unique compounds that later transfer to whoever consumes their meat. It's a highly specialized food chain, where each link was optimized by evolution to function in the planet's most challenging environment. Then there are the organs: liver, kidneys, heart, which our culture considers byproducts, but in Siberia are the most valued dishes. Reindeer liver contains extraordinary concentrations of vitamin A, B-complex vitamins, and coenzyme Q10, all essential for efficient mitochondrial function. Mitochondria are cellular power plants, and in extreme cold they need to work in constant overdrive. The animal's heart, pure and dense muscle, provides not just protein but also carnitine, an amino acid that literally transports fats into mitochondria to be burned as fuel. It's like having an express delivery system taking energy directly to where it's most needed. And then there's the blood. In cultures where every calorie matters, where each nutrient can be the difference between a survived winter and a fatal winter, nothing is wasted. Fresh blood carries immediately available iron, complete proteins, and a liquid matrix of nutrients the body can absorb almost instantly. This isn't barbarism. It's extreme nutritional sophistication. It's the difference between aviation fuel and regular gasoline. When you're flying in impossible conditions, you need the best fuel available. The way these foods are prepared also tells a story of cultural adaptation. Controlled fermentation of fish creates not just unique flavors, but also pre-digest proteins, making them more easily absorbable by bodies that need to extract maximum energy from each bite. The process also concentrates B-complex vitamins, essential for efficient energy metabolism. Seal fat, when available, is treated like liquid gold. Rich in fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K, it provides not just dense calories but also the cofactors necessary for calcium absorption, immune system maintenance, and antioxidant protection, all critical functions for bodies subjected to constant stress from extreme cold. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect of this nutrition is its timing. Meals don't follow conventional clocks. They follow the rhythms of thermal necessity. A hot soup of bones and marrow in the middle of the night isn't a snack. It's preventive maintenance of the body's heating system. During storms that can last days, when leaving the dwelling means certain death, these animal fat stores become the difference between a family that survives intact and a family that doesn't see spring. Fat isn't just food, it's security, it's future. It's the promise that there will be tomorrow even when today seems impossible. Fermented mare or reindeer milk carries probiotics adapted to the Arctic climate, keeping intestinal flora functioning efficiently even when the digestive system is under constant stress from processing diets very rich in proteins and fats. Modern studies reveal that when these peoples abandon their traditional diets, whether through urbanization, climate change, or economic pressures, the price is immediately paid in health. Cases of hypertension, diabetes, cardiovascular diseases increase, and significantly greater susceptibility to cold. It's as if each generation that grew up with this ancestral nutrition carries biological software calibrated to function with specific fuel. Change the fuel, and the software starts presenting bugs, failures, incompatibilities that manifest as disease. Eating to warm isn't metaphor in Siberia, it's literal biochemical reality. Each meal is a dose of preventive medicine, each ingredient a piece in the complex puzzle of keeping human life functioning when nature seems determined to freeze it. When an even grandmother prepares the first hot meal of the morning for her family, she's not just cooking, she's practicing a form of medicine that's thousands of years old. She's activating biological systems that were refined through countless generations. She's transforming simple ingredients from the tundra into the most sophisticated fuel the human body knows to burn against eternal cold. This circadian delay isn't a deficiency, it's evolutionary sophistication. While the outside world becomes too hostile for prolonged activity, the body recalibrates for a mode of existence where rest becomes active, where deep sleep is a warming strategy, where stillness is resistance. During the long winter months, when temperatures can reach 50 degrees and wind cuts like a blade, outdoor activities are reduced to the absolutely essential. Hunting expeditions are planned with military precision, taking advantage of specific weather windows and lasting only as long as necessary to avoid excessive exposure to deadly cold. Each outing is calculated. How many calories will be spent versus how many will be obtained through successful hunting. Inside heated dwellings, life assumes completely different rhythms. Women dedicate themselves intensively to textile work, not just out of practical necessity, but because these activities generate enough body movement to keep circulation active without requiring excessive energy expenditure. It's exercise disguised as productivity, warming masked as art. Elders assume a central role during these months, becoming living libraries that transmit knowledge through narratives that can last entire nights. It's not just entertainment, it's vital education, where each story carries lessons about survival, about reading natural signs, about perfect timing for different activities. It's during these long nights that young people absorb the wisdom that may one day save their lives. Nutrition also follows precise seasonal rhythms. During the coldest months, animal fat consumption increases dramatically, not by cultural preference, but by metabolic necessity. The Siberian body burns these fats more efficiently during winter, converting them directly into internal heat. It's as if the digestive system had an internal thermostat that adjusts to external thermal demands. When winter finally begins to loosen its deadly grip, another rhythm begins. The transition to spring isn't gradual, it's explosive. During the few weeks of thaw, communities enter accelerated recovery mode. It's time to repair equipment damaged by cold, to prepare materials for the intense fishing season approaching. to replenish fuel stocks that were consumed during winter. The Arctic summer, though brief, is a period of intense activity. With up to 20 hours of daily sunlight, the human body adapts for reduced sleep periods and prolonged activity. It's the season of intensive gathering. Wild fruits, medicinal plants, construction materials, everything needs to be collected during these few precious weeks before the cycle begins again. During these months of almost constant light, circadian rhythms adjust again, this time to maximize the use of favorable conditions. Sleep becomes more fragmented but no less restorative. Small, strategic naps interspersed with periods of intense activity. Spiritual rituals also follow these natural cycles. Thanksgiving ceremonies mark the end of each successful season, while protection and preparation rituals open each new cycle. These practices aren't just cultural tradition, they're psychological technology that maintains social cohesion and hope during the most challenging periods. The most remarkable aspect of these rhythms is how they create a sense of control and predictability in an environment that seems chaotic and hostile. Each family knows exactly what to do and when to do it, creating a sense of security based on ancestral knowledge tested by hundreds of generations. These aren't just survival patterns, they're prosperity patterns. Communities that maintain these traditional rhythms show significantly better health indices, lower incidence of seasonal depression, and greater social cohesion than those that abandoned these practices in favor of more modern routines. It's a powerful reminder that human adaptation to extreme environments isn't just a matter of technology or brute force. It's a matter of timing, rhythm, knowing when to act and when to rest, when to expose oneself and when to protect, when to consume and when to conserve. It's the art of dancing with nature instead of fighting against it, finding in the very movement of earth and seasons the compass that keeps life pulsing even when the world seems determined to freeze it forever. There's a devastating moment in the life of any civilization, that instant when progress, that golden promise of better life, reveals its hidden face and charges a price no one was prepared to pay. For the indigenous peoples of Siberia, that moment came disguised as modernization, urbanization, and integration into the globalized world. It came silently, like a snowstorm that seems harmless, until it completely swallows the familiar landscape. For millennia, Yakut, Evenk, and Nenet's bodies were sculpted by the planet's most implacable evolutionary pressure. Each cell, each metabolic process, each enzymatic reaction was calibrated to function perfectly with specific fuel. Reindeer meat rich in proteins, fatty fish loaded with omega-3s, organs dense in fat-soluble vitamins. It was a perfect biological machine, functioning in absolute harmony with its environment. But then came processed carbohydrates, refined sugars, industrialized vegetable oils, and something terrible began to happen. Imagine a Formula One engine, designed to run on the highest quality aviation fuel, being forced to run on contaminated regular gasoline. At first, maybe it functions, maybe it even seems normal, but slowly, inexorably, internal parts begin to wear out, efficiency plummets, and eventually the engine simply stops functioning properly. This is exactly what's happening to Siberian bodies. Recent studies conducted in the Yamal-Nenets region reveal a frightening truth. As consumption of traditional foods decreases, whether due to climate changes that interrupt migration and fishing routes, or due to growing dependence on imported foods, the health of these populations collapses dramatically. Hypertension, practically non-existent among populations that maintain traditional diets, now spreads like a silent epidemic. The numbers are alarming. The less time families spend consuming reindeer meat and local fish, the higher the incidence of high blood pressure. It's such a clear correlation, it seems almost cruel in its simplicity. But elevated blood pressure is just the beginning of a cascade of problems that completely redefines what it means to be healthy in modern Siberia. Type 2 diabetes, a disease their ancestors never knew, now appears with growing frequency, especially among women living in larger urban settlements. Obesity, another ghost non-existent in the past, begins to haunt communities where once every gram of body fat was precious fuel to survive winter. Indigenous women in particular show growing rates of obesity and cardiovascular mortality, especially those who abandoned the patterns of intense physical activity that characterized traditional life. Research on psychological stress reveals another devastating dimension of this transition. Among native populations like the Khanty and Mansi, 64% of respondents show elevated anxiety levels, a number that should make anyone stop and reflect on the true cost of progress. Systolic and diastolic blood pressure is systematically higher among natives living in large urban settlements compared to those in smaller, traditional communities. And among those who migrated completely to cities, the numbers are even more alarming. It's as if the very act of moving away from ancestral lifestyle were literally toxic to the Siberian body. But perhaps the most heartbreaking aspect of this transformation is how it affects children. Longitudinal studies show that between 1991 and 1995, a period coinciding with the collapse of the Soviet Union and consequent destabilization of rural communities, the number of Evenki children under 6 showing severe growth retardation more than doubled. These children are paying with their own bodies the price of social and economic transformations they didn't choose and don't understand. They're small organisms, genetically programmed to thrive on a specific diet and particular lifestyle, are forced to function under conditions completely different from those for which they evolved. The erosion goes beyond the physical. When a Nenet's grandmother can no longer teach her granddaughter to properly prepare reindeer meat because the family now depends on processed foods bought in the city, something irreplaceable is lost forever. When a young Yakut grows up without learning to identify natural signs that indicate the right time to fish, a living library of knowledge disappears. These cultural losses aren't just nostalgic. They have profound practical impacts on survival capacity. Knowledge about how to process and preserve traditional foods, how to recognize medicinal plants, how to read climate patterns, represents survival technology tested over millennia. When this knowledge is lost, communities become dependent on external systems that can fail. During economic crises, storms that interrupt supplies, or political changes that affect subsidies, these populations become vulnerable in ways their ancestors never imagined. There's also a deep psychological dimension to this loss. Traditional nutrition wasn't just nutrition. It was identity, ritual, spiritual connection with the land and ancestors. Shared meals were moments of story transmission, of strengthening family bonds, of celebrating life amid adversities. When these practices are replaced by industrialized foods consumed individually, something fundamental in social structure disintegrates. The result is frequently more fragmented communities, more isolated individuals, and a growing sense of disconnection from one's own cultural identity. Some efforts are being made to reverse this trend. Local initiatives work to create community stocks of reindeer meat and fish, trying to ensure traditional foods are available year-round, not just during hunting and fishing seasons. Educational programs seek to reconnect youth with ancestral practices, teaching traditional food processing and preservation skills. Some communities are establishing cooperatives that allow the sale of traditional products, creating economic incentives to maintain ancient practices. But these initiatives face enormous challenges. Climate change itself is altering migration patterns of fish and reindeer, making it more difficult to maintain traditional subsistence practices. Economic pressures force youth to seek work in cities, interrupting knowledge transmission between generations. The price of change continues to be charged daily, measured not just in deteriorated health indicators, but in lost traditions, forgotten knowledge, and cultural identities gradually dissolved in the homogeneity of global modernity. This isn't just the story of Siberian peoples. It's a reflection of similar transformations happening in indigenous communities around the world. It's a reminder that progress, when imposed without consideration for existing cultural and biological systems, can become a form of silent violence, a colonization that operates through food, lifestyle, and the aspirations of new generations. The real challenge now is finding ways to honor both past and future, preserving what's essential for the physical and cultural survival of these peoples, while allowing necessary adaptations to thrive in a transforming world. Because the price of change shouldn't be paid with the life, health, or soul of entire peoples. There are lessons that Siberian cold teaches, not with words, but with force and silence, with nature's brutality that challenges, and the veiled tenderness that only the most attentive can perceive. For peoples who have inhabited these frozen lands for centuries, cold isn't just an enemy to be feared, but an austere master, a demanding teacher who demands respect and offers, in return, ancestral wisdom engraved in the very soul. Contrary to common perception that sees winter as a time of lethargy and threat, Siberia's deep cold is a catalyst of wisdom, a school for human resilience where each lesson can be the difference between life and death. Here, each breath that crystallizes in the air, each cutting gust of wind that bites exposed skin, each layer of ice that forms over eyelashes, inscribes in the soul a visceral understanding about the value of adaptation and humility before natural forces. The first lesson cold teaches is about patience, not that passive patience that simply waits, but an active, conscious patience that understands that nature's time is different from human time. Siberian winter isn't just a passing season. It's a period that can last 8 consecutive months, where natural rhythm slows drastically and demands that humans align with the eternal tempo of the tundra. To survive, one must learn to wait without despair, not to yield to anxiety that prolonged discomfort can provoke. This patience is cultivated from earliest childhood, where Siberian children learn, often through games that seem innocent, to face cold with controlled calm, to regulate breathing to conserve energy, to move in calculated ways to maintain body heat. It's silent training incorporated into body and mind through generations that transforms initial fear, that primitive flight instinct before danger, into progressive and respectful confidence. Children learn that cold can be brutal, but can also be fair. It rewards adequate preparation and punishes negligence with absolute impartiality. The second fundamental lesson cold offers is about detailed observation and deep respect for the environment. In Siberia, the difference between a safe step and a fatal fall through thin ice can be a matter of a few centimeters imperceptible to untrained eyes. Knowing where to walk, how to identify subtle signs in clouds that announce sudden climate changes, perceiving wind direction and intensity to protect themselves adequately, all this vital knowledge is transmitted orally, incorporated into stories and rituals, guiding every movement in the frozen world. Cold sharpens the senses extraordinarily. People develop acute perception that allows them to detect subtle nuances in the frozen landscape, anticipating storms or atmospheric changes that would be completely invisible to an inexperienced observer. This developed hypersensitivity is fundamental not just for physical survival, but also for maintaining emotional balance during long periods of adversity. An elderly Yakut can sense a 2-degree temperature change through the quality of air he breathes. A Nenets woman can predict a storm by observing how sled dogs position their ears. A young Even can identify the exact direction of the strongest wind just by how snow accumulates in small undulations on the ground. The third lesson, perhaps the deepest, is about absolute community valuation. Cold, as a universal and impartial force, imposes limits that individually can be fatal, but in groups transform into surmountable challenges. Sharing body heat, dividing scarce food, narrating stories that keep spirits alive, distributing responsibilities so no one needs to face the weight of survival alone. All this becomes not just a practical strategy, but the most fundamental expression of human existence. Cold transforms the collective into an emotional and physical fortress. Interdependence among community members intensifies so much that creating deep bonds becomes literally a matter of life or death. These bonds are the true shield against existential loneliness and psychological despair that could easily infiltrate during endless months of polar darkness. On a night when external temperature reaches 45 degrees Celsius, when wind blows with enough force to knock down an adult, when leaving the dwelling for 5 minutes can result in frostbite burns, the presence of other people isn't just company. It's the difference between sanity and madness, between hope and surrender. Cold also teaches radical simplicity and forced moderation. When absolutely everything is scarce, when every piece of wood needs to be carefully rationed, when every calorie consumed must be justified by the energy it will provide, one learns with deadly rigor the values of enough. Waste isn't just an economic error, it's a sin against survival. Moderation ceases to be a philosophical virtue to become biological necessity. This lesson of simplicity extends far beyond material needs. Cold teaches one to value simple gestures that in milder climates would go unnoticed. A shared cup of hot tea, the warmth of gloved hands that touch for a moment, the comforting sound of wood crackling in the fire during a particularly frozen night. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, cold teaches absolute humility before natural forces. No matter how experienced a hunter may be, how well built a dwelling is, how carefully a family has prepared for winter, cold always keeps the last word. It's the constant reminder that humans, however adapted they may be, remain a vulnerable part of a much larger and infinitely more powerful system. This humility isn't defeatist submission, but respectful recognition that manifests in rituals that accompany seasonal changes, in whispered prayers to nature spirits, in ancestral stories that transmit gratitude for the opportunity to continue existing in a world that could easily sweep humanity from its surface. In this scenario of absolute rigor, where cold functions simultaneously as implacable adversary and patient teacher, Siberia's indigenous peoples forged a culture that not only survives, but genuinely flourishes, nurturing a deep and balanced relationship with the frozen landscape they have inhabited for millennia. To be in intimate contact with Siberian cold is to enter communion with an ancestry made of resistance, continuous learning, and deep reverence. It's recognizing that cold, in its apparent implacable severity, is also a source of inner strength, mental clarity, and spiritual transformation, a silent school where one learns to perfectly dose courage and prudence, individuality and solidarity, ambition and contentment. Each carefully adjusted layer of clothing, each calculated step over treacherous ice surfaces, each night slept under the infinite starry mantle of the Arctic, each hot meal shared around a crackling fire, all this is living testimony of this continuous and deeply transformative learning. Siberian cold teaches, finally, that living authentically isn't simply existing or even surviving. It's finding ways to flourish even facing the most cutting cold, discovering inner light and human warmth in sacred communion with wild nature and with those who share the same extraordinary journey of resistance and adaptation. It's learning that true strength doesn't come from dominating the environment, but from dancing with it in respectful harmony, finding in the very challenge of survival an inexhaustible source of meaning, purpose, and even beauty. An austere beauty, but genuine, that can only be understood by those who allowed themselves to be truly taught by Siberia's eternal cold. Intimate scenes, when human warmth defies the universe. In the vast and merciless frozen landscapes of Siberia, where cold transcends the physical and penetrates deep into the soul, intimacy reveals itself in gestures that, to external eyes, may seem simple or even banal, but carry deep, vital, and urgent meaning. They are small human scenes that illuminate resistance, showing how the most precious warmth doesn't come just from fire, but from connection between individuals who share a common destiny. Imagine the scene. A Nenets woman carefully adjusts the layer of skins wrapping her small child. Her hands glide with ancestral dexterity, checking that every fold is perfect, that nothing will allow entry of the cruel wind whistling outside. She attentively observes the boy's face, looking for signs of discomfort, any indication of cold penetrating exposed skin, and then, with a smile carrying all the tenderness in the world, gently holds his chin and offers him a spoonful of dense, hot soup, a liquid embrace that warms not just the body but the spirit that could easily break under the weight of adversity. This scene, repeated infinitely in homes that breathe to the implacable rhythm of Siberian winter, is an act of ancestral love refined through generations. Each meticulous clothing adjustment, each new load of wood brought to feed the hungry fire, each cup of tea carefully passed from hand to hand, is a concrete manifestation of silent and constant struggle against cold trying to invade every space, physical, emotional, and spiritual. Another deeply emblematic moment occurs when a Yakut man, his fingers already expert in this daily dance of survival, patiently helps his wife put on heavy reindeer fur-lined boots. He firmly holds her ankle, making sure all protective layers are perfectly aligned to avoid any moisture accumulation that could turn to ice and hurt delicate skin. The meticulous care and devoted attention to avoid the slightest discomfort reveal a delicacy rarely associated with such brutally harsh environments. It's intimacy forged by necessity, but tempered with genuine tenderness, because here, where a few minutes' error can cost toes to frostbite, each gesture of care is simultaneously pragmatic and deeply loving. These scenes of intimacy naturally extend beyond the family nucleus, encompassing the entire community with invisible but unbreakable bonds. In small villages scattered across Siberian immensity, where geographical isolation is accentuated by months of polar darkness, people depend on each other in ways that transcend mere social convenience. There's no space for individualism or selfishness when collective survival is at stake, sharing body heat during long nights that seem eternal, dividing without hesitation the little available food, offering immediate shelter to anyone who needs it. These are gestures that, though practical, assume almost sacred dimensions. During one of those frozen nights that make time seem suspended, when the thermometer marks 40-degree icing and wind howls like a wild creature, young and old instinctively gather around the central fire, an elderly even, his deep wrinkles mapping decades of survived winters, tells ancient stories with a grave voice that resonates like an invitation to a journey through time and collective memory. While he speaks, his trembling but still skillful hands hold a small bowl of melted animal fat, not just food, but tangible symbol of sustenance and continuity. The fire's golden warmth dances on attentive faces, creating an atmosphere of closeness that completely transcends the deadly cold besieging outside, and temporarily connects these people with something greater than their immediate circumstances. Children, carefully wrapped in blankets woven with hair from animals their own families hunted and processed, watch hypnotized these narratives carrying not just entertainment, but vital wisdom for their own future survival. For them, these moments are fundamental for building not just personal identity, but a deep sense of belonging to something greater than themselves. External cold naturally tends to distance bodies, creating a tendency toward physical isolation that could easily become emotional too. But the human warmth of these shared stories, these voices, intertwined in darkness, functions as a magnetic force uniting them, forming an invisible but resistant network of emotional protection against despair that could easily infiltrate during the darkest months. On particularly difficult nights when storms blow with violence that makes the dwelling itself tremble, and the thermometer seems to plummet indefinitely toward temperatures defying human survival, couples snuggle under multiple carefully organized layers of skins, communicating through delicate touches and subtle gestures, transmitting entire volumes about comfort, security, and constant presence. A simple touch on the hand, an arm extending protectively over a shoulder, a reassuring whisper in the dark. These small gestures function as emotional anchors, preventing anxiety and fear from completely dominating human spirit when external circumstances seem to conspire against hope. The entire nighttime routine is marked by small, intimate rituals, functioning simultaneously to preserve physical warmth and nurture emotional intimacy. The careful act of adjusting blankets to eliminate any air current, the precise movement of reviving fire to ensure it doesn't die during night, the exchange of low and comforting words before sleep, all this functions in harmony to calm not just the fatigued body, but emotions that could easily become turbulent under so much constant pressure. These routines create a climate conducive not just for much-needed physical rest, but for spiritual renewal that allows facing another day under the same challenging conditions. What makes these scenes particularly notable is how they reveal that, despite all the implacable rigor of Siberian environment, there exists space not just for brute survival, but for deep and genuine humanity. There exists an internal warmth that directly challenges external temperatures, a resistance woven meticulously with invisible threads of mutual care and authentic human connection. In the heart of Siberian winter, each breath that becomes visible in frozen air serves as constant reminder, both of fundamental human life fragility and extraordinary spirit strength when nourished by community and love. Each intimate gesture, each caring touch, each word whispered in night's deep silence functions as conscious act of rebellion against isolation and cold, a powerful affirmation that, even in the most adverse conditions the planet can offer, human warmth can not just survive but genuinely flourish. These intimate scenes ensure winter isn't merely a period of desperate survival, but also a season of deep communion, renewed connection, and love manifesting in the most unlikely circumstances. These are the moments transforming mere existence into truly lived life, even when the outside world seems determined to freeze all evidence of warmth and humanity. Therefore, observing attentively the intimacy scenes unfolding silently in wooden houses, skin tents, and temporary camps scattered across Siberian vastness, we perceive a fundamental truth. The true warmth keeping these communities not just alive, but thriving, isn't from fires that can go out or stoves needing constant feeding. It's the warmth of solidarity that never diminishes, of mutual care renewed daily, of constant and dedicated presence for each other. An internal and inexhaustible warmth shining brightest exactly when the outside world seems most determined to freeze all evidence of life, hope, and human love forever. Human love. Final breath, the silent pause of resistance. After this long journey through the planet's most implacable landscapes, after diving deep into the universe of peoples who transform the impossible into everyday life, comes the moment for a deep pause, a breath that echoes like hot vapor escaping lips on a 40-degree Celsius morning, visible for an instant before dissolving in Siberia's crystalline air. This isn't the end of a story, but the contemplative moment every great narrative deserves, that suspended instant where we allow the magnitude of what we witnessed to settle completely in our consciousness, like fresh snow covering a landscape already transformed by winter's passage. We can imagine for a moment the absolute silence reigning among ice-covered trees, interrupted only by the soft crackling of wood contracting in extreme cold, and the almost imperceptible whisper of wind carrying stories across infinite tundra. It's in this sacred silence that we best hear the true voice of human resistance. Not resistance that screams or struggles, but that which whispers with unbreakable dignity through generations of adaptation and survival. The story these peoples write isn't in books or monuments, but silently engraved in existence's very fabric, layer by layer in carefully sewn skins, movement by movement in daily gestures carrying millennial wisdom, breath by breath in ancestral rituals connecting present with a past that never truly passed. This ending doesn't mark a conclusion, but functions as deep celebration of the extraordinary disguised as ordinary. We celebrate modern science finally beginning to unravel fascinating secrets of adapted human metabolism, bodies that learn to burn fat like a perfectly calibrated internal furnace, circulatory systems defying physics laws by keeping extremities warm at temperatures that should cause instant necrosis. We celebrate cultural ingenuity refined through millennia, the extraordinary capacity to transform animal skins and raw wood into a second skin functioning better than any modern technology, into shelters becoming nests of human warmth, where life not just survives, but genuinely thrives. We celebrate ancestral wisdom that understood how to regulate existence's most fundamental rhythms: nutrition, rest, work, community, in perfect harmony with seasons testing the limits of what it means to be human. We now understand, with clarity coming only after true immersion, that Siberian cold, despite its almost mythological harshness, its capacity to kill in minutes and absolute indifference to human suffering, also functions as invisible architect of human connections. It builds bridges of emotional warmth between community members sharing the same extraordinary destiny, bridges made of solidarity tested by ice's fire, of mutual care becoming matter of life or death, of love manifesting in the simplest and most essential gestures. And if any doubt still remained about these adaptations' immensity, about this human transformation's depth, just remember that cold doesn't destroy, it transforms. These people's culture, body and mind are living testimonies of extraordinary dialectical relationship with environment. They don't just passively resist cold as heroic victims, but embrace it as demanding partner, learn its severest lessons as dedicated students, and use it as fuel to move forward with unshakable dignity. This transformation goes far beyond mere biological survival. It's complete reinvention of what it means to be human when confronted with forces seemingly designed to make human existence impossible. It's living proof that our species carries within itself adaptive resources sleeping until awakened by absolute necessity. This ending functions as gentle but urgent invitation to reflect on deep and often forgotten connection between being human and wild nature, about authentic resilience born not from arrogance or denial, but from genuine humility before vast and often implacable natural worlds surrounding us, and of which we are inseparable part. It's a call to value and protect forms of life, thriving at apparent margins of possibility, carrying within them wisdom, transcending national borders, cultural differences, and even linear time. Wisdom offering crucial insights for our own survival in an increasingly challenging and unpredictable world. What we learned from these peoples goes far beyond extreme climate survival techniques. We learned about community's fundamental importance when confronted with adversities exceeding our individual capacity. We learned about ancestral knowledge value in era, often discarding everything not new as irrelevant. We learned about beauty found in most unlikely circumstances, about dignity maintained intact, even when everything around suggests despair, closing our journey through Siberia, through cold that seemed impossible to bear, through lives of peoples who transformed this cold into home. May we carry with us the deep breath of this resilience, a gentle but firm rhythm, paced like controlled breathing of someone who learned to conserve energy for a long walk across tundra. May this breath become tangible inspiration for our own daily battles, our own personal winters, our own moments when life seems more challenging than our capacity to face it, because we all have our own Siberia to cross, our own colds to transform into warmth, our own adversities to convert into wisdom. And above all, may we recognize with renewed humility that true human strength isn't in denying difficulties or pretending we can control forces greater than us. It's an extraordinary capacity to reinvent ourselves and flourish even facing the most cutting cold, finding genuine warmth in communion with others, in preserving culture giving meaning to existence, and in shared love becoming more precious exactly because it's offered in most difficult circumstances. This final breath, slow and deep like someone's sigh finally arriving home after a long, dangerous journey, serves as a reminder that human resistance is continuous and eternal, not as empty motivational slogan, but as biological and cultural reality tested through millennia. It's a flame burning silent but constant in Arctic's white vastness, a beacon guiding not just these peoples through their own seasons of adversity, but all humanity through uncertain seasons yet to come. May this moment of quiet reflection accompany us far beyond this specific dive into Siberian universe, bringing inner peace, renewed admiration for human adaptation capacity, and expanded understanding of warmth's true meaning, not just as physical temperature felt on skin, but as life fully lived in all its nuances, intensities, challenges, and unexpected beauties. Because in the end, after witnessing how these peoples transformed survival into art and adversity into dignity, we understand that cold also teaches the most important lesson of all. Being truly alive means finding ways to warm not just our own bodies, but hearts of those sharing our journey through existence's long and implacable winter.